I want you to take a second and imagine your old university library.
Hmm.
Like, really try to picture the physical space in your head.
Oh, yeah. You probably remember the smell first, right?
Exactly. That distinct, slightly dusty, comforting scent of aging paper, floor wax, and just quiet concentration.
Right, and you picture the aisles stretching out, maybe those old wooden card catalogs if you go back far enough.
Yeah, or at least those heavy desktop computers where you look up a call number.
Mm-hmm.
And there's the librarian sitting at the front desk, basically acting as a traffic cop for physical books. It feels safe.
It does. It feels completely disconnected from the chaotic, fast-paced digital world outside its doors.
Right. But today, I need you to take that peaceful, dusty image and completely shatter it.
Because it's an illusion now.
Yeah, a total illusion. The reality of what a modern academic institution actually is, beneath the surface of the ivy-covered brick, is, it's going to shock you.
It really is.
Today, that same library, that exact same university, is a high-tech fortress sitting on top of an unfathomable digital goldmine.
A gold mine that most of them don't even know how to guard.
Exactly. And the stakes for managing that gold mine are unimaginably high. We're looking at a scenario where one wrong move, one misplaced file, or like one naive vendor contract could literally cost a university hundreds of cores in legal penalties.
Yeah, the transformation from a quiet repository of books to a complex data processing hub is just staggering. Frankly, a vast majority of educational institutions are operating with a severe blind spot regarding the legal and financial landmines they're currently sitting on.
Which is exactly our mission for today.
What?
Welcome to today's Deep Dive. We're unpacking a truly fascinating presentation delivered by Naavi.
Right, and for context, Naavi is a renowned cyber law expert, a former physicist, and the chairman of the DPDPA.
Yeah, the Foundation of Data Protection Professionals in India. He delivered this intensive briefing to an alumni network of library science, specifically at Manasa Gangotri, for their Diamond Jubilee celebration.
It was a very specific audience, but a vital message.
Totally. Our goal is to dissect his core message and understand exactly how the digital revolution, massive new data protection laws, and the rapid intrusion of AI have permanently transformed academic institutions.
From peaceful learning hubs into high-stakes digital battlegrounds, Naavi's briefing to these alumni served as a critical wake-up call.
Yeah.
He provided this meticulous breakdown of an industry that is fundamentally mismatched with the modern regulatory environment it now finds itself in.
So, whether you are a current student, a parent trying to protect your child's data, an academic, a university administrator, or just someone wildly curious about how privacy operates today, I promise you this deep dive will completely change how you view things.
Simple things, too.
Right. Things as simple as enrolling in a class, swiping your campus ID card, or just checking out a book. You will simply never look at the educational system the same way again.
To truly grasp the magnitude of this shift, we really need to understand the lens through which Naavi views this evolution. His professional background makes him uniquely qualified to identify this specific collision.
Because he didn't start out in cyber law, right?
No, not at all. He didn't start his career analyzing data protection frameworks. He actually started out in the exact environment we just asked you to visualize.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Naavi was an ex-student of the Department of Physics at Manasa Gangotri, belonging to the 1971 to 1973 batch.
Well, he was right there in the thick of it.
Exactly. He was a top-ranked physics student who spent countless hours utilizing those traditional physical library facilities. He even attended library science classes for a week before formally committing to his MSc program.
So he knows the tactile, analog world of traditional academia intimately. He understands the culture from the inside.
Right, the philosophy that information should be something you can hold in your hand and share freely.
Which is such a nice thought.
It is. But from there, he transitioned through the public sector banking system, gaining insight into institutional finance, moved into the private sector, and then, in 1998, he made a massive pivot.
He became a pioneer in the domain of cyber law and data protection law in India.
And his current work even extends to the complex regulation of AI and neurorights. He has personally lived through and helped regulate the entire spectrum of this technological evolution over the last 5 decades.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because his core thesis in this presentation is that the library of today is what he terms a hybrid.
A hybrid, yeah.
We aren't just talking about a building on a campus anymore. A modern library is a digital publisher. It provisions off-campus connectivity. It acts as the global hub.
Exactly. Seamlessly interfacing with academic databases and libraries worldwide. A local, state-level university library can, with minimal effort, project its digital footprint globally.
But expanding that capability necessitates a fundamental rewiring of the job description for the people managing it, right?
Right. Completely. The librarian's primary directive is no longer being a custodian of physical books. They have inadvertently become custodians of digital data and digital identities.
They've gone from managing physical library cards that you stamp with ink to managing complex digital identities with multi-factor authentication.
Yes. From physically handing over a hardcover book to issuing digital access tokens. And the security focus has subsequently evolved too.
How so?
Well, in the past, a librarian's security concern was preventing a patron from slipping a rare manuscript into their backpack.
Right, physical theft.
Today, their mandate is implementing sophisticated cybersecurity measures to protect the CIA of data.
Ah, the CIA triad. Confidentiality, integrity, and availability.
Exactly.
We hear those three words a lot in tech, but let's ground them in a university setting for a second. Confidentiality means ensuring only the right student or professor sees a specific document, right?
Precisely.
And integrity means guaranteeing that when a professor uploads a grade or a research paper, a hacker hasn't secretly altered the text or the score.
Right, the data hasn't been tampered with.
And availability means the server doesn't crash the night before final exams when 10,000 students are trying to download the syllabus.
That is the CIA triad in action. But achieving that triad requires a specific operational culture. Educational institutions, by their very design, are not built like technology firms or financial institutions.
Which is where we run into a massive friction point.
Naavi identifies this as a severe cultural shock. Educational institutions possess what we must analyze as a legacy mindset.
A legacy mindset.
Yeah, the entire societal purpose of a school or university is rooted in information dissemination, societal welfare, and unrestricted openness.
Which, again, is a beautiful philosophy for a learning environment.
It is essential for learning. But this legacy mindset is now on a direct collision course with the modern commercial mindset.
Right.
Securing digital networks and complying with privacy laws demands a paradigm centered on data secrecy, compartmentalization, and extreme caution regarding access.
To visualize this clash, imagine a traditional university as a bustling community center. The architecture is inviting, the doors are propped wide open, there are signs welcoming the neighborhood in.
Very welcoming.
Yeah, people are actively encouraged to wander the halls, share communal resources, and strike up conversations with strangers. It's built, from the ground up, for maximum access and minimum friction.
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
Now, imagine that overnight, someone transports a massive, impenetrable bank vault filled with solid gold.
The data.
Exactly, representing all this highly sensitive digital student and faculty data. And they drop this bank vault right into the middle of the community center's lobby.
That's a great analogy.
The problem isn't just the vault. The problem is the staff. The staff is still acting like they're running a community center. They're still propping the front doors open on a hot day.
Right.
They're still letting anyone walk into the lobby unbothered because maintaining a welcoming culture is all they've ever known.
And the administrators, the librarians, the academic deans, the hostel wardens, their professional DNA is welfare-oriented. They are inherently permissive.
They want to help people.
Exactly. They do not look at a student asking for a file or a vendor offering a new software tool as a potential vector for a catastrophic data breach.
But Naavi's message to these institutions is stark, isn't it? Maintaining this permissive attitude with data is no longer just an administrative blind spot.
No, it is an existential legal liability. This cultural mismatch transitions from a theoretical problem to a very tangible danger when you introduce the regulatory environment.
The laws.
The laws. We're looking at two massive legal pillars currently rewriting the operational rules for the academic world in India.
So this permissive culture is colliding with some of the most aggressive digital legislation we've ever seen. We need to dissect exactly how these laws criminalize the legacy mindset.
Let's do it. We must examine two distinct legislative frameworks. The first is the older foundational law, the Information Technology Act, or ITA, of 2000.
Effective from October 17th, 2000. So it's been the law of the land for over 2 decades.
Right. While initially designed to govern individual cyber activities and promote e-commerce, it casts a wide net over organizations.
It kind of brought the physical world into the digital.
Exactly. It essentially ported existing physical laws into the digital realm, formalizing the legality of emails, websites, digital contracts, and defining cybercrimes.
But the penalties under the ITA are not trivial administrative fines. Like
Right.
Naavi specifically notes that contraventions of the ITA can result in actual imprisonment for the officials involved.
Imprisonment, yes. We are talking about severe civil liabilities paired with criminal charges. In our specific context, the ITA 2000 classifies a university library as an intermediary to the extent that it provisions network connectivity.
So if the university is providing the Wi-Fi or the Ethernet cables, they are the middleman facilitating the flow of digital traffic.
Precisely. Being an intermediary legally binds the institution to a specific set of obligations regarding the monitoring, filtering, and securing of that traffic. That is the first pillar.
Okay, the ITA.
But the second pillar is the one triggering a genuine seismic shift across all sectors right now. This is the Digital Personal Data Protection Act, or the DPDPA of 2023.
And based on the timeline Naavi provided to his audience, this act is not some distant hypothetical. It is coming into full regulatory effect very soon, on May 13th, 2027.
Right around the corner. And the DPDPA enforces a complete paradigm shift in the fundamental nature of information.
How so?
Well, under older frameworks, a student's record was viewed simply as a document owned by the school. But the DPDPA legally recognizes personal data as the property of the individual.
It transitions from being an administrative file to being tangible personal property.
Exactly. Because it is the property of the individual who the law terms the data principal.
The data principle, okay.
Right. Any organization that collects, stores, processes, or transmits that data is legally designated as a data fiduciary.
Okay, the word fiduciary carries massive weight. Like if I hire a financial fiduciary to manage my retirement fund, they are legally bound to make decisions solely in my best financial interest.
Yes.
Exactly.
They can't take my money and gamble it on risky stocks just because it benefits them.
And the exact same legal and ethical duty now applies to data. Organizations, which explicitly includes universities, affiliated colleges, and even autonomously managed departments, are now legally acting as trustees of their students' and employees' data.
They have an absolute duty to protect it.
An absolute duty. And here is the critical mechanism that academia is really struggling to process. The DPDPA does not contain sector-specific exemptions for education.
Meaning a university doesn't get a regulatory discount just because they are engaged in the noble pursuit of educating the youth.
The regulatory framework is entirely agnostic to their noble intentions. The law applies with equal force to a massive commercial banking entity like the State Bank of India, a sprawling healthcare provider like Apollo Hospitals, and a local academic campus like Manasa Gangotri.
Wow.
In the eyes of the law, they are all simply data fiduciaries managing citizen property. Let's look at the actual teeth of this law, because the numbers Naavi highlights are difficult to process. He points out that failure to comply with the DPDPA carries maximum penalties of up to Rs 250 crores for a breach of security of personal data.
It's a staggering number.
It is. To ground that number, Naavi juxtaposed it against the actual operating budget of a major university. The budget expenditure for Mysore University for the 2026-27 academic year is roughly Rs 438 crores.
So a 250 crore fine.
Exactly. If a university gets hit with a 250 crore fine, that isn't a penalty. That is a death sentence. How can regulators logically impose a fine that equates to more than half of a state university's entire annual operating budget?
Well, it appears disproportionate until you analyze the regulatory logic behind the DPDPA. The legislation is intentionally designed to be punitive enough to force board-level compliance across every sector.
They want it to hurt.
They do. The regulators are operating on the premise that an organization's status as a publicly funded educational institution does not mitigate the catastrophic harm inflicted on an individual if their sensitive personal property is breached.
Right. If a student's financial identity is stolen.
Or their biometric data is compromised and sold on the dark web because a university maintained terrible legacy cybersecurity, the law demands accountability proportional to the severity of the breach affecting the citizen.
Not proportional to the university's capacity to pay.
Exactly.
It forces the administration to abandon the community center mindset overnight, because holding on to that permissive culture now guarantees financial ruin.
To comprehend how these legal mechanisms actually deploy in the real world, we don't have to theorize about the future. Naavi grounds his warning in the ghosts of cybercrime's past.
Ooh, I like that phrase.
He provides harrowing case studies that demonstrate how these liabilities attach to university leadership.
He points to a notoriously famous case from 2004 involving IIT Kharagpur. This perfectly illustrates the devastating potential of the ITA 2000 law, doesn't it?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this case is foundational. In 2004, a student residing at IIT Kharagpur acquired a highly scandalous explicit video. It was widely known as the DPS MMS video.
Okay.
The student made the decision to monetize this file. He accessed an e-commerce platform called Bazy.com, which was a prominent marketplace later acquired by eBay, and created a listing offering to email the video to anyone who paid $1.
So he actively utilized the internet to distribute explicit material for profit.
He successfully completed the transaction about 7 times before law enforcement agencies intervened. The Delhi police tracked the activity, arrested the student, and charged him.
Right, which makes sense.
He faced up to 5 years of imprisonment and was entirely rusticated from IIT, effectively terminating his academic career.
The student committing the crime facing consequences is totally expected. But the legal blast radius extended far beyond the dorm room, didn't it?
This is where the law becomes terrifying for administrators. Because the student utilized a third-party platform to facilitate the sale, the police did not stop at the student. They arrested the CEO and the general manager of Bazy.com.
Wait, really? The executives?
Yes, those 2 corporate executives were also charged and faced 5 years of imprisonment under the IT Act.
Which introduces a legal concept that every university administrator needs to understand right now. Vicarious liability.
Vicarious liability is the legal doctrine where a supervisory party, such as a corporation, a platform owner, or an executive, can be held legally and criminally responsible for the actionable conduct of a subordinate, an employee, or a user operating on their infrastructure.
Especially if they didn't have safeguards.
Exactly, particularly if the supervisory party failed to implement adequate safeguards or due diligence. The executives of Bazy.com were entangled in a massive legal nightmare, fighting their case through the court system all the way to the Supreme Court for 8 years.
8 years of litigation because one user uploaded a file to their servers. But let's bring this back to the university. The student initiated this crime using the IIT Kharagpur campus network. The university was the infrastructure provider.
And Naavi explicitly highlights that the dean of IIT Kharagpur and the institution's IT directors narrowly escaped formal inquiry.
Wow.
And the very real potential of facing 5-year imprisonment themselves. The university library and the campus network function legally as an intermediary, provisioning the connectivity the student used to commit the crime.
If the law allowed for their arrest, why did they escape it back in 2004?
Naavi's analysis suggests it was a combination of factors unique to the era. Law enforcement in 2004 was navigating nascent cyber laws. They were likely hesitant to aggressively pursue the leadership of a highly prestigious institution like an IIT.
Or they just didn't have the legal precedent yet.
Exactly. They may simply have lacked the technical and legal precedent to aggressively push the boundaries of vicarious liability against a university acting as an ISP.
But if that exact same scenario played out today, with modern law enforcement agencies that have dedicated cybercrime divisions and a deep understanding of intermediary liability.
Oh, the outcome would be drastically different. The dean, the chancellor, and the IT directors would absolutely find themselves in the legal crosshairs. The actions of a single mischievous or malicious student operating on a campus network can directly entangle the university's top administrators,
placing their personal freedom at risk under the ITA. That 2004 case serves as a historical warning regarding network intermediary liability. But Naavi then bridges the timeline, contrasting it with a 2024 case to demonstrate the modern threat landscape under contemporary data protection laws.
Yes. He cites a major incident from 2024 involving 2 prominent universities in South Korea. These institutions suffered a severe cyber attack resulting in unauthorized access to their internal systems. The resulting regulatory action levied a fine of roughly 4 crores against them.
The fine itself is substantial, but the truly alarming detail is the specific data the hackers managed to exfiltrate.
The hackers bypassed the security perimeters and accessed the personal sensitive data of students and their parents belonging to a graduation batch that was 20 years old.
Decades-old data. Files from alumni who haven't set foot on campus since the early 2000s.
This case fundamentally proves that holding on to legacy data is not a harmless administrative quirk. It is a ticking time bomb. Educational institutions possess a notorious cultural habit of never deleting anything.
That is so true.
They hoard records indefinitely, often driven by a misplaced sense of historical preservation, the desire to track alumni for future donations, or simply profound administrative inertia.
They just forget it's there.
Exactly. But under modern data protection frameworks like the DPDPA, the equation is terrifyingly simple. If you hold the data, you hold the liability.
For decades, university IT departments thought their job was just building a strong firewall to keep hackers out.
Okay.
But the South Korean case proves that cybersecurity is only half the battle. If a university realizes they are legally acting as a trustee for millions of files from 20 years ago, and they get hit with massive regulatory fines simply because they failed to delete data they no longer had any operational reason to keep. I mean, that completely redefines their operational mandate.
It forces a shift from perimeter defense to comprehensive data lifecycle management. They have to justify why every single file exists on their servers.
Which naturally leads us to ask, what exactly does this legacy data consist of? What is buried in this academic data minefield? When I think of the footprint I left at my university, I assume it's a digital transcript, maybe my disciplinary record, and a few library fines.
That assumption vastly underestimates the reality of modern institutional data collection. When you systematically categorize the information a contemporary educational institution processes, the sheer volume, granularity, and sensitivity of the data are frankly shocking. They are essentially hoarding digital gold.
If we peel back the layers of a student's digital file, what are these universities actually collecting and storing?
Well, it begins with the foundational data, which is already highly sensitive. Extensive student and familial profiles, names, precise dates of birth, permanent addresses. But in the Indian context, this immediately scales to critical financial identity markers.
Like what?
Universities mandate the collection of Aadhaar numbers, PAN cards, detailed banking information for fee transfers, scholarship applications, student loan disbursements, and parental income certificates.
If a malicious actor gains access to an Aadhaar number, a PAN card, and a bank account number, they possess a complete financial identity theft kit.
Complete.
They can open lines of credit, hijack accounts, and ruin a student's financial future before they even graduate.
And the financial data is just the first layer. Institutions maintain extensive health and special needs records, psychological counseling notes, detailed disciplinary histories, and verified guardian information. Furthermore, we are seeing a massive proliferation of biometric data collection on campuses.
We see this constantly with automated attendance systems.
Right. Universities are aggressively deploying systems that collect fingerprints, iris scans, and facial recognition data. These are used for mundane tasks like access control in hostels, library entry, or verifying attendance in large lecture halls.
But the legal classification of biometric data places it in the highest tier of sensitivity, doesn't it?
Absolutely. The reason is immutable. If a student's password is stolen in a database breach, the IT department can force a password reset. If a student's facial recognition hash or fingerprint data is stolen from a poorly secured hostile server, that biometric marker is compromised for the rest of their life.
Yeah, you cannot issue a student a new fingerprint.
You cannot. The permanence of the breach makes the liability catastrophic.
Beyond the students, what about the faculty and the research wings?
The employee data profile is equally vast. Faculty salaries, detailed tax records, medical insurance claims, and extensive background verification reports. But the true hidden vulnerability lies in research data.
Research data.
Think about the daily operations of a university medical college, a social science department, or a psychology research lab. They are processing live clinical trial data, capturing highly sensitive qualitative data on human subjects, and storing confidential intellectual property and proprietary algorithms.
So if a graduate psychology student is conducting a qualitative study on severe trauma or domestic abuse, and they have unanonymized interview transcripts sitting on a shared departmental server, I mean, that is incredibly sensitive, highly destructive personal data.
A failure to rigorously anonymize and secure that specific research data before storing it, or a failure to properly govern who has access to that shared server, exposes vulnerable identities. It triggers massive, multi-tiered liability under the DPDPA.
We also have the alumni data we discussed regarding the South Korean case. Career trajectories, donation histories, updated contact details, often held for decades without any defined retention policy. And critically, Naavi emphasizes the presence of minors' data.
Yes. Primary schools, high schools, and junior colleges are processing the data of children. Under the DPDPA, processing a minor's data requires verifiable, documented consent from a legal guardian, adding an entirely separate, highly complex layer of compliance architecture.
To illustrate how this data aggregation translates into tangible risk, Naavi outlines specific high-risk scenarios. Let's analyze the architecture of a standard digital admission portal.
Okay.
It's the primary gateway. You scan and upload every major document in your life to apply.
Precisely. Applicants upload Aadhaar cards, caste certificates, income proofs, prior academic records, and medical histories. All of this highly sensitive documentation is collected upfront before the institution has even made an admission decision.
Wow.
This creates what cybersecurity professionals call a massive aggregation risk. If a sophisticated threat actor breaches the admission portal's database, they don't just compromise the data of the 3,000 students who eventually enrolled, they exfiltrate the comprehensive dossiers of the 50,000 students who applied.
That's a huge target. Another scenario Naavi points out is the chilling reality of campus surveillance. We touched on biometric attendance, but he specifically highlights the tracking of behavioral patterns.
This is a big one.
Using facial recognition at a hostile entrance isn't just about unlocking a door. It creates a continuous time-stamped log of exactly when a student leaves, when they return, and who they are with. Monitoring the behavioral patterns of students on campus, particularly when those students are minors, is explicitly restricted and heavily scrutinized under the DPDPA.
It forces a profound question about consent.
Exactly. Did the student truly freely consent to having their biometric facial maps scanned every time they go to sleep? Or was that consent essentially forced upon them as an unavoidable condition of securing university housing?
And the DPDPA fundamentally rejects forced or coercive consent. If a university cannot prove that the consent was freely given, specific, and informed, the entire biometric security apparatus becomes legally indefensible.
I want to pivot to a very specific detail Naavi included in his presentation, because it seems completely counterintuitive to me. He listed the obvious dangerous data, biometrics, clinical research, bank accounts.
Yeah.
But he also explicitly listed reading habits of students, interests, digital access logs, thesis access records.
Yes.
On the surface, tracking what a student reads in a library seems entirely innocent, almost foundational to what a library does. Why does a digital access log tracking book checkouts suddenly become a dangerous privacy liability under modern law?
It is a profound shift that cuts to the very core of modern privacy theory. Historically, if a librarian noticed that a specific student was checking out dozens of books on political dissent or researching complex literature regarding a specific stigmatized medical condition, that observation was ephemeral. It stayed in the librarian's head.
Right.
Today, that interaction is not ephemeral. It is recorded as a digital access log in a permanent, globally searchable, relational database.
It transforms from an observation into a behavioral profile.
Exactly. Your reading habits constitute highly revealing behavioral data. An algorithmic analysis of a student's thesis searches and reading lists can accurately deduce their political leanings, their sexual orientation, their hidden health anxieties, and their religious explorations.
Oh, wow.
If a university library database meticulously tracks that a student is actively researching minority rights or seeking resources on managing severe depression, that data profile becomes incredibly potent and highly sensitive.
Because it paints a complete picture of their internal life.
Right. And if that database is breached by a malicious actor, or worse, if the university actively shares or monetizes those access logs with third-party data brokers, educational tech vendors, or government entities without explicit granular consent, it represents a profound violation of privacy.
A library is philosophically designed to be a safe, unmonitored sanctuary for intellectual exploration.
Yes.
If that exploration is digitally tracked, permanently stored, and potentially commodified, it becomes a severe liability under the DPDPA, which explicitly governs the processing of behavioral data.
Absolutely.
When we aggregate all of this, the financial identities, the biometric facial maps, the clinical trauma transcripts, the decades of legacy alumni records, and the intimate behavioral profiles of what students are reading, we realize that universities are sitting on a treasure trove that rivals any major bank.
They really are.
But unlike a bank, these networks are managed by institutions still clinging to a permissive community center mindset. That combination makes the education sector a giant, glowing target for global cybercriminals.
The criminal syndicates are acutely aware of this architectural and cultural vulnerability, which brings us to the actual siege currently being waged against the global education sector. Naavi presents statistics that strip away any illusion of safety.
What does the numbers look like?
According to the IBM X-Force 2024 Threat Intelligence Report, education is currently the third most targeted sector globally for ransomware and cyber attacks.
Third globally. They are being targeted right behind the global financial sector and international healthcare systems.
And the threat is equally severe domestically. CERT-IN, the Indian Computer Emergency Response Team, reports a staggering statistic. 68% of Indian educational institutions have suffered at least one verified data breach in the last 3 years alone.
Nearly 70% of schools have had their perimeters breached recently. We are long past discussing this as a hypothetical risk. It is an active epidemic. How are these threat actors consistently penetrating these networks?
Naavi systematically breaks down the 4 primary attack vectors devastating the sector. The first, and undoubtedly the most disruptive, is ransomware.
Ransomware.
Threat actors infiltrate the university's network, often dwelling silently for weeks to map the architecture. Then, they execute an encryption payload that locks down everything. Student grading records, the online examination systems, the financial databases, the payroll servers. They essentially lock the university out of its own digital existence and demand a massive financial ransom for the decryption keys.
A university's operational calendar makes them uniquely vulnerable to the psychology of a ransomware attack, doesn't it? Like if a hacker targets a corporate manufacturing plant, the plant loses money, but they might decide to fight the attack and restore from backups over a few weeks.
Right.
But hackers deliberately target universities during highly critical, time-sensitive periods, like the week before final examinations or during the peak of the admission cycle.
They know exactly when to strike.
They understand that the university administration is under immense psychological and political pressure to avoid catastrophic disruptions. A chancellor might make the calculation that quietly paying a massive ransom to get the exam systems back online in 24 hours is preferable to facing the public chaos, student protests, and media scrutiny of canceling finals and admitting a massive data loss.
It is digital extortion leveraging the academic calendar. The second major vector is phishing and BEC, which stands for Business Email Compromise.
Okay, BEC.
This relies heavily on social engineering rather than brute force hacking. Sophisticated attackers craft highly convincing, forged emails that appear to come from the university's chancellor, the finance department, or a trusted vendor.
To trick them into sending money.
Exactly. They target the university's finance officers to authorize fraudulent wire transfers. Alternatively, they set up perfectly cloned fake login pages for the student payment portals. This results in massive credential theft and fee fraud. They successfully trick parents into wiring thousands of dollars in tuition payments directly into a hacker's offshore bank account, believing they are paying the university.
The third vector Naavi details is perhaps the most difficult for an institution to defend against because the threat originates from inside the perimeter, insider threats.
Securing a network against Russian or North Korean state-sponsored hackers is one challenge, but how does an institution defend against its own people?
Right.
Insider threats involve disgruntled faculty members, former students whose network access was never properly revoked, or administrative staff possessing highly privileged administrative accounts.
And what do?
These insiders can quietly exfiltrate and leak upcoming examination papers, maliciously alter grade data in exchange for bribes, or systematically steal personal student records to sell to identity thieves. Because they already have legitimate access credentials, their malicious activity is incredibly difficult to detect until the damage is done.
And the fourth vector Naavi emphasizes is credential stuffing. Here's where it gets really interesting. To understand the mechanics of credential stuffing, let's use an analogy.
Okay.
Imagine you join a local gym, and your assigned locker has a standard 3-digit combination lock. You choose the combination 123. A thief standing nearby watches you, steals your combination, and eventually opens your gym locker. They steal your towel. It's annoying, but the damage is contained. But imagine that thief then takes that exact same 123 combination, walks across town to your primary bank, punches it into the main vault, and the vault miraculously opens. Then they walk to your house, punch 123 into your front door smart lock, and the door opens.
The vulnerability exists because human beings fundamentally resist memorizing multiple complex passwords. They reuse the same password for everything.
Exactly. A student will use the exact same email and password combination to register for a random, poorly secured online gaming forum that they use to log into their university's secure academic portal.
And then?
When that random gaming forum inevitably suffers a data breach, the hackers steal a database containing millions of usernames and passwords. They don't manually type them in. They use automated botnets to rapidly stuff those millions of stolen credentials into the login pages of banks, healthcare portals, and university networks.
Because the student reused the password, the hacker suddenly gains authenticated access to the university portal. The system believes it is the student logging in.
The stolen gym locker key magically opens the bank account.
Precisely. Once inside, the attacker can manipulate grades, forge digital degree certificates, or access the financial aid disbursement systems to route student loan funds into their own accounts. Defending against these four sophisticated vectors requires immense technical resources.
A huge burden.
But the true nightmare for administrators is that the DPDPA attaches a massive, unforgiving regulatory ticking clock to these technical failures. Under the specific provisions of the DPDP Rules 2025, institutions are granted a maximum window of only 72 hours to officially notify the Data Protection Board of India, the DPBI, of any personal data breach.
That timeline is brutally short, 72 hours from what specific triggering event?
From the precise moment the institution becomes aware of the breach.
Let's play this scenario out practically, because this is where the legacy culture completely collapses. It is 6:00 p.m. on a Friday evening before a long holiday weekend. A junior IT technician notices some anomalous encrypted files on a secondary departmental server.
Okay, a Friday evening.
He isn't entirely sure if it's a minor software glitch, a failing hard drive, or the initial staging of a massive ransomware attack. Under the old, permissive legacy mindset, that technician might reasonably say, "I'm clocking out. I'll run a diagnostic on this when I get back on Tuesday morning."
But under the strict regime of the DPDPA, the regulatory clock began ticking the moment he observed the anomaly.
Wow.
If he waits until Tuesday morning to escalate the issue, more than 72 hours have already elapsed. The university is in direct violation of federal law before the leadership team even fully comprehends that they have been attacked.
So they have to respond immediately.
The law mandates that universities design and implement an incident response architecture capable of identifying an anomaly, containing the threat, determining the scope of the compromised personal data, and formally reporting the incident to the federal government within 3 days.
Irrespective of weekends, national holidays, or staffing shortages.
Irrespective of all of that. If an institution fails to meet the 72-hour notification mandate, the DPDPA outlines a specific, staggering penalty. The fine strictly for non-notification of a breach can reach up to Rs 200 crores.
The government can fine a university 200 crores not for the hack itself, but simply for being late to inform the regulators that the hack occurred.
It is a draconian mechanism designed to force institutions to abandon complacency. They must invest heavily in 247 continuous network monitoring and rapid automated response capabilities.
So university networks are under constant siege from international ransomware syndicates, credential stuffers, and rogue insiders. But Naavi makes a crucial pivot in his presentation. He points out that universities often don't even need to be hacked to lose control of their students' data. In many cases, the institution is willingly handing the data over, walking blindly into what he defines as the third-party trap.
This represents perhaps the most systemic, pervasive vulnerability in the modern educational ecosystem. The concept of the academic campus as a secure, walled garden is dead. The modern campus is entirely borderless.
Because they rely on an army of third-party vendors to function.
Yeah, exactly. No university builds its entire software stack from scratch. They rely on a massive, interconnected ecosystem of third-party vendors. They deploy commercial edtech platforms for their learning management systems, massive ERP software suites for administration, automated online examination portals, and outsourced cloud hosting.
They're pushing everything to the cloud.
And crucially, these vendors are frequently storing and processing the university's student data on overseas server farms. When an Indian university utilizes cloud storage providers like Google Workspace, Microsoft Azure, or Amazon Web Services, and that student data is routed through or stored on servers located outside the territorial borders of India, it triggers highly specific cross-border compliance obligations under Rule 14 of the DPDPA.
Which means
The central government holds the authority to restrict data transfers to specific geographic regions or countries. The university must rigorously verify compliance and ensure adequate legal protections are in place before allowing a single byte of student data to cross the border.
And it isn't just the massive multinational tech companies. Naavi highlights that this vendor ecosystem includes specialized companies conducting background verifications on new faculty, proprietary library management software providers, companies building the campus bus transport tracking apps, and vendors managing the digital health records for the campus clinic.
The critical operational failure occurring across academia right now is that these vendor relationships are rarely governed by valid, legally rigorous back-to-back data processor agreements mandated by the DPDPA.
So they're just handing it over.
Basically, a university will casually hand over a database of student records to a transport app vendor, operating on a naive assumption that the vendor will act responsibly. But without a meticulously drafted legal contract binding that vendor to the specific security standards of the DPDPA, the university retains 100% of the legal liability if that transport vendor suffers a data breach.
I want to push back on one very specific example Naavi uses to illustrate this third-party trap, because from a traditional academic perspective, it sounds completely insane. He states that the standard university placement and internship process constitutes a major DPDPA risk.
Oh, yes.
He points out that student CVs, comprehensive academic performance reports, and contact details are routinely bundled and shared with hundreds of corporate placement companies without explicit individual student consent or formal data processor agreements. But getting students hired is literally the primary objective of a university.
Which is their core marketing tool.
Exactly. Come study at our institution. Our corporate placement rate is 98%. How can the simple, universally accepted act of a career services office sending a graduating student's resume to a corporate partner like Infosys, TCS, or Wipro suddenly be classified as a massive privacy violation?
Because the DPDPA hinges on the principle of purpose limitation.
Purpose limitation.
When the university originally collected that data from the student, they collected it for the explicitly stated purpose of providing an education. If the Career Services Office then takes that data, which, remember, is legally the personal property of the student, and transfers it to a third-party, for-profit corporation for the entirely different purpose of employment screening and corporate recruitment, the university has fundamentally changed the purpose of processing. Under the strict interpretation of the law, they cannot execute that transfer based on vague implied consent or simply because that's how university placements have always worked.
They need explicit documented permission for that specific action.
They require individual, granular, verifiable consent from the student, specifically authorizing the transfer of their data to that specific corporation. Furthermore, the university must establish a back-to-back processor clause or a formal data sharing agreement with the hiring corporation,
dictating exactly how that corporation is allowed to handle, store, and eventually delete the student's resume.
Yes. If the university simply emails a batch of 500 unencrypted resumes to a corporate recruiter without those legal safeguards in place, they are illegally distributing the personal property of their data principals.
That interpretation is going to completely upend the operational model of every career services office in the country. They are used to operating as bulk data brokers for corporate recruiters.
It mandates a complete operational overhaul. And the legal tangle becomes exponentially more complex when you factor in the international dimension of modern academia. Consider the data flow of international students studying in India.
Oh, that's a whole other layer.
An international student from Germany studying at an Indian university generates data that might simultaneously be subject to the aggressive extraterritorial reach of the European Union's GDPR, while simultaneously falling under India's DPDPA. If they're an American student receiving federal financial aid, their data might also trigger the United States of FERPA regulations.
It creates a multi-jurisdictional liability matrix that university legal teams are completely unequipped to untangle. What about the massive push for study abroad programs or international twinning and exchange programs?
Joint degree programs executed in partnership with foreign universities fundamentally require the bulk, cross-border transfer of student academic records, disciplinary histories, and health information. Under the new regulatory frameworks, these bulk transfers cannot occur seamlessly.
Right.
They require extensive, legally documented safeguards, ensuring that the receiving foreign institution and the jurisdiction they operate within offer a comparable level of data protection.
We also have to consider the massive research wings. Naavi explicitly mentions the complexities of securing international research grants from bodies like the NIH in the United States or the EU Horizon projects in Europe.
Those international funding agencies frequently demand open data sharing, or at least the cross-border transfer of massive research data sets, as a non-negotiable condition of awarding the grant. The university's research division must somehow reconcile those aggressive foreign data sharing mandates with the strict localized transfer restrictions and consent requirements of the Indian DPDPA.
It forces researchers to walk a geopolitical and legal tightrope just to secure funding. So let's summarize the battlefield an institution finds itself on. They are facing constant siege from automated hacking syndicates aiming to steal their digital gold. They are dealing with disgruntled insiders.
Yep.
They are bleeding data through hundreds of unsecured third-party software vendors. They are entangled in conflicting international privacy laws. And looming over all of this is a domestic regulator threatening 250 crore fines and potential imprisonment if they fail to perfectly navigate this chaos. How does an educational institution actually survive this?
It's overwhelming.
They can't just unplug the servers and go back to physical books and card catalogs. They need a comprehensive battle plan.
They desperately need a structured methodology for survival. And the core value of Naavi's presentation is that he provides exactly that, a comprehensive new rulebook for institutional governance.
He lays out a tangible path to compliance, but before he gives the university administrators their operational checklist, he very deliberately centers the conversation on the rights of the individual, the listener, the person the law refers to as the data principle.
Centering the data principle is crucial because an institution cannot build a compliant architecture until it fully understands what it legally owes to the individual. The DPDPA empowers citizens with a suite of highly potent rights.
Let's analyze these rights because this directly impacts everyone listening. First is the right to access and provide information.
This right demolishes the historical opacity of institutional data processing. It means you, as a student or employee, have the absolute legal right to demand to know exactly what data the university holds on you, exactly how it is being algorithmically processed, who specifically it is being shared with, and for what precise purpose.
Universities can no longer rely on vague catch-all clauses buried on page 50 of a student handbook. Second is the right to correction and erasure. If a university's database has your name misspelled, or more critically, if an algorithm has incorrectly calculated your academic standing or financial aid eligibility based on flawed data, they are legally obligated to rectify that data promptly upon your request.
Third, and perhaps most disruptive to the legacy mindset, is the right to withdraw consent.
The right to withdraw consent is massive. Suppose you signed a form during freshman orientation allowing the university to use your photograph in their marketing brochures. 3 years later, you decide you no longer want your image used.
Under the DPDPA, you can simply withdraw that consent. The university must immediately cease using your image and scrub it from their active digital marketing assets. Furthermore, if a specific piece of data is no longer strictly necessary for the core purpose of providing your education, say a medical record from a minor clinic visit 4 years ago, you can demand its erasure, and they must comply.
Finally, individuals have the right to a grievance redressal mechanism, forcing institutions to build internal courts to handle privacy complaints, and the right to nominate a legal beneficiary who inherits control over your digital data footprint in the event of your death. So those are the aggressive rights granted to the individual. How does a massive, slow-moving university actually build a technical and administrative system capable of guaranteeing those rights without grinding to a halt?
Naavi outlines a highly specific 10-step compliance action plan tailored for educational institutions. It serves as a systematic roadmap to entirely overhaul their data governance architecture.
Let's dive deep into the mechanics of this 10-step survival guide. If an institution is looking at this existential threat, the starting line can't just be buying better antivirus software. They need a structural, executive-level overhaul.
Exactly. The foundation is organizational. Step 1 mandates the appointment of a data protection officer, or DPO. This cannot simply be the existing IT manager given a second title. It must be a dedicated, highly trained professional whose sole operational directive is regulatory compliance.
And for big universities.
Crucially, for massive universities that process immense volumes of sensitive data, the government will likely classify them as significant data fiduciaries, or SDFs. If classified as an SDF, the law dictates that the DPO must be physically based in India, and they must have a direct reporting line to the absolute highest level of authority.
Board of Management or the Governing Council.
Right. This ensures the DPO cannot be overruled by a mid-level dean trying to rush a non-compliant software deployment.
Once the DPO is in place, step 2 is arguably the most daunting logistical challenge. Creating an inventory of processes or an IOP.
The IOP is the bedrock of compliance. A university cannot protect data it doesn't know it has. The institution must initiate a massive audit to map every single data flow across the entire campus. They have to map the admissions portal, the examination grading systems, the alumni donation networks, the biometric hostel gates, the campus clinic records, and the placement office's resume databases.
They must meticulously document exactly what specific data elements are collected, where they are stored, who has access, and most importantly, attach one legally justifiable purpose to every single process. It's essentially creating a massive, highly detailed map of the university's entire digital nervous system.
Once they have mapped the data, Step 5 tackles the hardest part of interacting with the students: implementing a centralized consent management system. The era of handing a student a massive stack of papers during orientation and asking for one blanket signature at the bottom is legally dead.
Wow.
A compliant consent management system must be capable of capturing, recording, and managing granular consent. A student must be able to click yes to their data being used for grading, but click no to their data being shared with the Alumni Fundraising Committee.
Furthermore, this system must perfectly handle the complexities of verifiable guardian consent for minors, ensuring that every consent action is cryptographically tied to a unique timestamp and verifiable identity to prove compliance during an audit. And the mechanism that ensures all of this actually works, rather than just existing on paper, is Step 10. Conducting periodic DPIAs and engaging independent audits.
A DPIA is a Data Protection Impact Assessment. Before a university leadership team can launch any new high-risk data processing initiative, for example, deciding to deploy a new AI-driven biometric attendance system across all lecture halls, they must formally conduct a DPIA.
This assessment forces them to technically map the project, identify the inherent privacy risks to the students, and document the specific cryptographic and administrative mitigations they plan to implement.
And they cannot simply grade their own homework. The law mandates that significant data fiduciaries must engage certified independent data auditors to extensively review their systems annually and formally certify their compliance to the federal government.
Looking at this 10-step plan, hiring DPOs, mapping millions of data flows, building granular consent engines, running DPIAs. This sounds impossibly complex for a university IT department to build from scratch. Do they just have to guess at how to translate the legal text of the DPDPA into software?
Fortunately, they do not have to reinvent the wheel. This is precisely the critical role played by the FDPPI, the organization Naavi currently chairs. They recognized the gap between abstract legal mandates and practical implementation, and they developed a comprehensive framework called DGPSI.
The Data Governance and Protection Standard of India. How does the DGPSI framework actually function on the ground for an institution?
The DGPSI acts as a crucial translational bridge. The DPDPA is a piece of legislation. It tells you what the law requires, but not how to achieve it. The DGPSI framework takes those abstract legal requirements and translates them into a highly structured 50-point practical governance standard.
It provides organizations with a ready-made, auditable blueprint for compliance.
Exactly. It includes specialized modules for complex areas like AI usage and HR management, and the FDPPI is actively developing highly specific sectoral frameworks tailored exclusively for the unique architectures of educational institutions.
Naavi also touches upon the FDPPI's initiative to essentially create an entirely new professional class to support this ecosystem: independent data auditors.
Given the mandatory audit requirements, there is a massive deficit of qualified professionals capable of evaluating these complex systems. The FDPPI is actively building a cadre of highly trained professionals, offering pathways starting as probationary independent data auditors and escalating to fully certified auditors.
These are the specialized external experts who will possess the technical and legal authority to walk onto your university campus, rip apart their data architecture, audit their consent management systems, and definitively certify to the DPBI whether the institution is genuinely complying with the law or merely engaging in compliance theater.
This raises an important question, though, regarding the fundamental nature of universities in India. Naavi asks his audience to consider, what is my relationship as a part of a university which is state-owned, but where we are autonomous in our administration?
That question exposes a brilliant and incredibly messy legal wrinkle unique to the Indian higher education system. A vast number of major Indian universities are state-owned entities, essentially functioning as massive extensions of the state government.
Right.
However, the internal architecture is highly fragmented. Individual departments, research wings, or massive affiliated colleges within that university often operate with near-total administrative and financial autonomy. So when the massive 250 crore DPDPA fine inevitably comes down, who is legally left holding the bag?
That is the multi-million-dollar question. Who is the actual legally defined data fiduciary? Is it the state government that funds the institution? Is it the university chancellor sitting in the main administrative building? Or is it the principal of the autonomous affiliated college who actually purchased the software and collected the students' data?
The DPDPA determines fiduciary status by identifying the entity that explicitly determines the purpose and means of processing the data. In this fragmented academic architecture, an autonomous college might legally be classified as a joint fiduciary alongside the parent university.
Navigating the shared legal liability of a data breach between a parent university and an autonomous college requires the drafting of incredibly precise, highly negotiated internal legal agreements. Agreements which currently almost zero universities have in place.
Okay, so a university leadership team has to navigate state versus autonomous liability, hire DPOs, map millions of data points, build granular consent engines, and survive independent audits. Establishing these rules and wrestling this legacy culture into compliance is a monumental task, even when dealing with traditional static data like addresses, grades, and PDFs. But Naavi's presentation saves the most explosive threat for last. There is a rapidly accelerating new technology currently flooding into classrooms that threatens to take this entire, carefully constructed 10-step compliance plan and completely obliterate it.
We have arrived at the final, most volatile, and frankly, most poorly understood frontier of academic data protection: the AI intrusion. Naavi rightly frames this as education's new Wild West.
Naavi dedicates a significant portion of his deep dive to exploring how artificial intelligence shatters traditional privacy boundaries. He systematically categorizes the AI-related risks into 6 distinct categories, labeling them R1 through R6. Let's carefully analyze the mechanics of these 6 categories because these tools aren't hypothetical futures. They are actively deployed in classrooms and dorms right now.
The first category, R1, addresses AI-powered proctoring and biometric surveillance. We witnessed a massive panic deployment of tools like ProctorU or Examly during the pandemic to facilitate remote testing.
Right. A student sits at home, takes a test on their laptop, and the webcam watches them to ensure they aren't cheating. On the surface, it just looks like a glorified Zoom call.
But the underlying mechanics are vastly more invasive. These AI tools do not merely record a video feed. They actively process highly sensitive biometric markers in real time. They utilize sophisticated eye-tracking algorithms to monitor exactly where a student's gaze drifts on the screen to detect potential cheating.
They track your eyes.
Yes, and they employ continuous facial recognition mapping to verify the student's identity against their ID card throughout the 3-hour exam. They even use keystroke logging algorithms to analyze the unique rhythm of how a student types.
Under the stringent definitions of the DPDPA, all of these actions constitute the automated processing of highly sensitive biometric data. The legal compliance burden required to force a student to submit to an AI extracting their biometric eye-tracking data simply to take a mandatory mathematics test is astronomically high, and most universities are completely ignoring it. That brings us to R2, algorithmic grading and automated decisions.
Universities are increasingly experimenting with AI tools designed to automatically assess written essays, calculate predicted grading curves, or even algorithmically rank massive pools of students to determine who receives limited scholarships.
The profound risk here lies in the mechanics of algorithmic bias, doesn't it?
Absolutely. AI models must be trained on massive historical datasets. If an AI grading tool is trained on decades of a university's historical grading data which inherently contains human prejudices regarding gender, caste, geographic region, or socioeconomic status, the AI will silently encode and amplify those historical biases. Allowing a black box algorithm to make a consequential automated decision regarding a student's academic future or financial aid eligibility represents a massive legal liability and a profound ethical failure.
Which flows perfectly into the risks associated with R4 AI in admission screening.
It is the exact same fundamental issue applied to the gateway of the institution. Utilizing AI algorithms to screen and filter thousands of student applications based on opaque criteria can rapidly lead to systemic discriminatory outcomes that violate fundamental constitutional rights, triggering massive regulatory investigations.
Let's look at R5, AI chatbots for student counseling and support.
To cut administrative costs, universities rapidly deploy automated AI chatbots on their main websites and student portals to answer routine queries about campus life or class schedules. However, students, particularly those in distress, often anthropomorphize these bots.
They treat them like real people.
Yes. A student experiencing a crisis might confess extreme academic stress, severe mental health struggles, or even suicidal ideation directly into the chatbot interface. If the university hastily deployed that chatbot using a third-party vendor without an ironclad, meticulously negotiated data processor agreement dictating strict data retention policies, high-level encryption, and mandatory breach notification protocols, that highly sensitive, highly volatile psychological data is sitting entirely unprotected on a commercial server outside the university's control.
R6 focuses on the use of AI in academic research.
Academic researchers are eager to train their own specialized AI models. They frequently use massive datasets of human subjects, such as thousands of student disciplinary records or thousands of patient files from the university hospital as training data. Researchers generally assume that if they strip the names off the files, the data is anonymized and therefore legally safe to use.
But it's not.
However, advanced computer science literature has repeatedly proven that simple anonymization is entirely insufficient against modern AI. Sophisticated algorithms possess the capability to cross-reference seemingly anonymous data points and successfully re-identify the specific individuals within the training data, triggering a catastrophic data breach.
I want to return to the category we skipped, R3, because understanding the mechanics of the specific risk completely blew my mind. So what does this all mean? R3 focuses on generative AI and the submission of student data to commercial large language models, or LLMs. Let's map out a scenario that happens 10,000 times a day on any given campus.
Okay.
A professor assigns an essay. The student writes the essay. The professor, trying to be helpful and modern, tells the class, "Before you submit your final draft to me, I want you to run your text through Grammarly to check your spelling and syntax, or paste it into ChatGPT and ask the AI for feedback on your paragraph structure." To a legacy academic mindset, this is just using a modern digital calculator for writing. Is that seemingly innocent instruction actually a legal problem?
Under a rigorous interpretation of the DPDPA, that instruction is not just a problem, it is a massive, highly actionable legal violation.
Wow.
Let's dissect the mechanics of what the professor is actually mandating. The student has spent hours creating a piece of intellectual property. That essay contains their original thoughts, their unique analytical voice, and quite potentially deeply personal data, opinions, or reflections. When a university faculty member actively forces or even strongly encourages a student to paste that original essay into a commercial third-party LLM interface like ChatGPT, Claude, or Grammarly, the professor is effectively mandating the transfer of that student's personal data to an unauthorized private commercial AI provider.
Because the university IT department doesn't have a legally binding back-to-back data processor agreement signed with OpenAI or the corporate entity behind Grammarly?
Exactly. The student is interacting with the consumer-facing version of the tool. The university is effectively declaring to the student, in order to successfully complete this academic assignment and receive a grade, you must surrender your personal data and your original intellectual property to this massive private corporation, knowing full well that the corporation will ingest your essay and use it as permanent training data to refine their commercial algorithms.
By forcing that interaction, the university is severely violating the student's fundamental rights, as a data principle, to control where their data flows and for what purpose it is utilized.
Understanding that mechanism is going to fundamentally break the brains of every professor currently teaching. They genuinely believe they are just teaching students how to use modern productivity tools. They don't realize they are acting as an illegal conduit, funneling student intellectual property into commercial AI training servers.
This profound disconnect between academic intent and technological reality is exactly why the impending DPDP Rules 2025 mandate incredibly strict AI compliance obligations. For universities large enough to qualify as significant data fiduciaries, the regulatory rules will require their independent data auditors to conduct a highly specific algorithmic risk assessment.
Right.
They cannot just audit the databases. They have to explicitly audit the AI systems processing any personal data.
To help institutions survive this AI intrusion, Naavi's FDPPI framework, specifically the DGPSI AI extension, outlines very tangible action steps. First, the university IT department has to build a comprehensive AI inventory.
Right.
This isn't just a list of official software. They have to map every single AI tool currently deployed anywhere on campus, from the official AI proctoring software down to the random AI summarization plugins professors have installed on their browsers, and document exactly what personal data each tool touches.
Following the inventory, the institution must draft and enforce a campus-wide AI ethics policy. They must institute rigorous vendor due diligence protocols, meaning before the university purchases a new EdTech AI tool, they must legally demand to see the vendor's algorithmic bias audit records and verify their technical capacity to permanently delete a student's data from the AI's training weights upon request.
Crucially, achieving compliance requires massive, mandatory faculty training programs. Professors must be educated to understand the severe legal peril of casually incorporating commercial AI tools into their syllabi.
And as with any high-risk data processing, the university must execute a comprehensive DPIA, a data protection impact assessment, before deploying any AI tool utilized for high-stakes outcomes like exam proctoring or admission screening, particularly when the system will process the data of minors.
The intersection of traditional education, aggressive data protection law, and the rapid deployment of artificial intelligence has resulted in a permanent collision. The era of the naive, permissive, community center academic institution is definitively over. Survival now requires treating a university campus as a complex, highly regulated data processing facility.
We have covered an absolutely immense amount of complex ground today, tearing apart the hidden infrastructure of modern academia. We started by visualizing the comforting smell of old books, only to dissect the profound cultural shock of a library staff realizing their building is now a heavily targeted data fortress.
Yeah.
We navigated the sheer terror of the DPDPA's potential 250 crore financial penalties and examined the historical ghosts of vicarious liability that prove university deans can, and have, faced imprisonment for the network traffic of their students. We walked through the terrifying scope of the legacy data minefield, the biometrics, the financials, the clinical trials.
And we outlined the multi-front siege being waged against campus networks by ransomware syndicates, credential stuffers, and rogue insiders. And we exposed the insidious legal traps of third-party vendors and borderless cloud data transfers. We detailed the rigorous 10-step survival guide necessary for compliance, highlighting the critical roles of data protection officers, comprehensive process inventories, the DGPSI framework, and the absolute necessity of independent algorithmic auditors.
And finally, we explored the profound complexities of regulating artificial intelligence in the classroom, demonstrating how a simple writing assignment can trigger a massive data violation. The singular overarching takeaway from Naavi's exhaustive presentation is that your data is your personal property. Educational institutions can no longer act as passive hoarders of that property. They must completely rebuild their governance architectures from the ground up to treat your digital identity with the extreme respect, security, and legal caution the modern regulatory environment now demands.
Very well said.
I want to leave you with a final, somewhat chilling thought to mull over. Synthesizing the incredible technological and legal fuzzes we've discussed today, Naavi explicitly pointed out in his inventory of risks that libraries are actively tracking the reading habits, digital access logs, and thesis searches of their students. He also highlighted the massive inherent risk of AI being utilized for behavioral profiling and algorithmic analysis. So I want you to truly think about the implications of combining those two facts.
It's a scary combination.
It is. In our current era, where sophisticated AI models possess the capability to build a highly accurate, incredibly granular psychological, medical, and political profile of us based purely on an analysis of our digital behaviors. What happens to the fundamental concept of academic curiosity?
That's a great question.
If a 20-year-old student decides to deeply research a highly controversial political movement or checks out a specific, radical set of historical texts simply to understand the mechanics of an opposing viewpoint, that intellectual exploration is no longer a private, fleeting moment. That digital access log is now a permanent record. It is collected, processed, permanently stored on a server, and potentially ingested and analyzed by an AI behavioral algorithm.
Exactly.
Could the very act of pure intellectual exploration be algorithmically flagged as the behavioral risk?
Yeah.
Could a late-night database search for a controversial sociology thesis today be perfectly recalled by an algorithm and used to penalize that student by a future corporate employer or a future government administration decades down the line? If our private intellectual explorations within the walls of a university are no longer ephemeral thoughts, but instead classified as permanent, globally searchable, algorithmically analyzable property, does true academic freedom actually still exist in the digital age? Keep questioning the digital architecture of the world around you. We'll see you on the next Deep Dive.